Welcome to the Unearthed Man podcast, the journey to becoming a conscious man. Hey all, Stephen here and welcome to episode 65 of the Unearthed Man podcast. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode with Mike. Given his kindness in hosting me on his podcast, Mindfully Outdoors, it was great to have him on as a guest. Now, I've always had an affinity with the ocean for as long as I can remember. Not just any ocean, the kind of ocean where there are waves, rips and a sense of chaos. I'm not against other water styles such as lakes, rivers, bays, etc. However, there is something special about being out in the ocean. When friends or family ask me to spend time with them up the river or say they're heading to the bayside beach, I'm reluctant to go along. Don't get me wrong. I respect and love all water-based features and spent my share of time paddling in a lake, down a river or bathing under a waterfall. And they all have their place. But there's something much more profound, however, something contained deep in the soul that continues to drive me back to the ocean. Only later in life am I realising the ocean has two key components that I align with. The chaos of the feminine energy exuded by the waves and the visual effect of being able to see the earth breathe. I akin the waves rolling in and out to our breath. As the waves roll in, that is the out-breath. And then when it retreats into the ocean, that is the in-breath. My other absolute favourite activity is snorkeling along coral reefs. The ability to swim in silence, listen to the crack of the coral, the sound of the coral fish eating, observe the beauty of the multitude of fish, places me in a completely different world. Now when it comes to Australian Aboriginal culture, one of the ways they are defined is by where they live in their affinity to that part of the country. I guess similar to my guest today, that would make me a saltwater man. On this point, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this unceded land and pay my respects to the elders, past, present and emerging. Now, a quick shout out to our sponsor, Surf Coast Wellness Rooms, based in Torquay, Victoria, in Australia. As men, we spend much of our time looking after and caring for others and very little time on our own self-care. So you now have an opportunity to change all that. Using the code THEUNEARTHEDMAN10 at the time of booking, you'll receive a 10% discount on any of their services, including float tanks, infrared saunas, massages and salt therapy. It's great to use before or after a day at the beach. You can find a link to the website and the code below. Here's a few things to go through before we kick off with today's guest. First, the Unearthed Men community, made up men willing to support and be supported by other men, continues to grow. We're well and truly over 50 men by now. If you're a man or know of a man who's seeking his tribe or his community, then please use the link in the show notes below to sign up. Alternatively, you can message me via any of the social media channels. Secondly, please subscribe to the podcast via your preferred app and leave a review. The quickest way to enable the podcast to become more accessible worldwide is to receive a 5-star review. By doing this, you also acknowledge and thank my guests for their time, effort and wisdom. And finally, if you are a man struggling with the daily grind, have constant feelings of guilt, shame or anxiety, feeling irritated or frustrated and have lost track of who you are with a deep inner sense that there is more to life than this, then expressions of interest for my 8-week men's empowerment program are now open. I'm only taking 10 men into each 8-week program this year. If you are interested, click the link below to join the waitlist, as it is filling fast. Alright, on to today's episode. My guest today is a proud Nyul Nyul man from the Kimberleys in Western Australia. He grew up on Gunditjmara Country in Warrnambool and now lives in Waddawurrung Country, Geelong. Each place has kept him connected to the ocean, which is important given that he is a saltwater man. He creates sand artwork using just his feet and uses drone photography to capture the scale of his works within breathtaking landscapes. It all started as a way to get out on the beach and connect with culture, country and sea. He carves stories from the sand using the same foot movements he was taught through dance and movements by his people, and dance and movements his people have practiced for countless generations. The artworks tell stories of family, identity and connection. He was taught his dances from age 10 and has performed in South Africa, China and New Zealand. Today he passes this knowledge on to young Aboriginal men through Waddawurrung, a company he co-founded to deliver mentoring, cultural programs and cross-cultural training. Since starting 2.5 years ago, he's quickly grown in popularity and demand with his unique art and storytelling style. He's been commissioned for many significant projects, including a Visit Vic tourism campaign for the Great Ocean Road, Shepherd and White Night Projection Festival. He is currently working with the GPT group to develop culturally creative and immersive spaces for their Space Co. shared office spaces across Australia. He's been featured in several group art exhibitions over the past 2 years and is about to open his own art gallery in Geelong on Waddawurrung Country. In July this year, he was awarded the 2022 National NAIDOC Creative Talent Award. This greatly recognises his hard work, dedication and passion for his art and culture. I've been friends with this beautiful man for around 18 months, however it feels like we've been connected for much longer. I regularly learn from him about culture and appropriateness and treasure our friendship. Welcome to the Unearthed Man podcast, Lowell Hunter, or also known as Salty One here. Hey Lowell, how are you?
Very well, thanks Milvo.
It's great to have you on board. Now, just so people know, this is our first live podcast. So I've been doing the show this is season 3, and I've never actually had, because of all the lockdowns and everything else, it's always been via Zoom. And Lowell just happens to be in the area and visiting, and we're like, he's like, dude, and because I had to say to him, let's do a podcast. He's like, I'm a bit busy at the moment. As it turns out, he's dropped over, so might be a bit echoey here. It might come through a bit, but, it's awesome to be able to do a face-to-face and just have a chat with this beautiful man. So welcome to our house, mate, and welcome to doing the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Really keen to have a bit of a yarn today with you and share a bit about myself.
Awesome. Looking forward to that. So one thing for us is the podcast is about story. And I know that's pretty key in your culture. But it's also, talking about men and their own journey and where they've come from. So as I said, you started, your journey in Nyul Nyul up in, which is brewing, the Kimberleys. So can you tell us a bit about the journey, where that started for you, how you ended up down in Gunditjmara land? I'm getting better and better at trying to pronunciate. So and how that all worked for you, mate.
Yeah, sure. So going back over 38 years, I guess, where it all started. Actually born in Carlton,
right?
Believe it or not. And wasn't too long after I was born that mum and dad decided to separate. And through that separation, I stayed with my mum and ended up back in Broome and the Kimberleys with my older sister and older brother as well. So from a young age, I was immersed in Kimberley culture, which is quite strong. And as you alluded to earlier, my saltwater connection is because our people are saltwater people. So, very fortunate, I think, from a young age to be connected and grounded in culture. And I remember as a really young fella, like talking toddler years, that, mum would take me out fishing, hunting, or even camping on some of the beaches in some of the remote parts of the Kimberleys. So we're talking north of Broome, a place called Dampier Peninsula. And on the peninsula, there's towns like Beagle Bay, Juddigen, One Arm Point, Cygnet Bay. And I can recall travelling around with mum and extended family, just spending time out in some of those remote parts of the Kimberleys, which was pretty special. I look back on it now and I feel like we didn't have much in terms of what some people would consider, as much these days, maybe in a materialistic sense. But what I did have was something that some people never have as well. So very special, those early years as a young fella. And then eventually I ended up moving back to Victoria, and that was due to, I think, looking back on it, mum not being in a well enough state at the time to look after my sister and I. Mm-hmm. And, if we're going to dig into maybe some of, my journey and what I've been going through, but also why I have gone through some of those challenges through life, I think it obviously draws back to what we call transgenerational trauma. So for my mum and a lot of our family in the Kimberleys, there was a mission established, and the missionaries in that time was around assimilation and ultimately removing a lot of our family members from their families. And, we talk about what's called the stolen generation. So my mum was a part of the stolen generation. Right. So, I think that severely impacted her mental wellness and spiritual wellness, because she wasn't allowed to do a lot of things with her family. They were told they weren't allowed to practice culture. There were significant impacts on how they were living their lives to how they had to live their lives. So I think looking back on that, Mum, had a really challenging time going through her life because of that trauma that she'd experienced from a young age. So, and then it got to a point, I think, where maybe she struggled with a lot of that trauma in her life through, maybe masking a lot of that pain, with substance abuse and other things. So that led, I think, to her not maybe being in a well enough state to look after my sister and I. So we had to make the trek down to cold Victoria, freezing cold Victoria, in a place called Warrnambool, commonly known for, the wet and wild weather. And we ended up moving over to live with my father.
Okay.
Dad's got an English background. His parents, my grandparents, are German and Austrian descent. And so that's through my dad's line, but through my mum's line, identify strongly as a Nyul Nyul saltwater man, Indigenous First Nations culture. So, yeah.
So just so we can put that in context, because I know I've had an opportunity to talk to a number of Aboriginal guys on here, and the stolen generation comes up a few times. Like, so you're 38, and your mum, who sadly recently passed away. Yeah. So she would have been 50s, 60s?
67.
67. So she was part of the stolen generation literally 67 years ago. Yeah. So we're talking mid-50s when this happened. So again, I just want to remind people when they're listening to this, we're not talking about something that happened hundreds of years ago. Like this is Australia. This is the so-called westernised, modernised, progressive place we live in, and we're stealing children 60 years ago and displacing them away from their language and their culture. And so, when you hear First Nations, Aboriginal, Indigenous people talk about the challenges they got, this is real for them, because this is like, imagine that happened to your mum. And I'm talking to probably a lot of non-Indigenous people out there when we have this conversation. Like, imagine if that was your parents that were just picked up and moved away and said, you can't speak German, you can't speak, whatever language is, or you can't speak English anymore. Yeah. Imagine you can't speak English, you're now going to go and learn this other language. It's horrific.
Yeah, it certainly is. And sometimes it's hard to reflect on a lot of that trauma because it is quite raw still. Yeah. We're having to deal with a lot of it in some of the social issues that you see within our communities today. So it is still alive. It is, we call it transgenerational because it moves from one generation to another because, unless there's healing done or, ways in which people can, I guess, manage some of those traumas that they're experiencing, unfortunately it does, have a follow-on effect to the next generation because they haven't had a chance to, deal with what they're experiencing or what their families experience. So, yeah, quite significant and still very raw. And one thing you did mention was, imagine that happening only 60 odd years ago. The trouble is, and the problem is that it's still happening today with our young people being removed from their families and placed, in situations like out-of-home care and, other situations. So it is that transgenerational trauma still continuing as well. But I didn't want to talk too much about that today. I'm really keen to share my journey and
I appreciate that.
What I've been up to as well.
Yeah, so on that basis then, you've then left Nyul Nyul and made your way into Gunditjmara Country, which is down at Warrnambool. Yeah. And in with your dad. What was that like down there? I'm from this western part of Victoria, so what was that like having to move down, cold, not knowing anybody, you and your sister?
Yeah. It's certainly a huge culture shock on so many levels. Like not only the physical in terms of the environmental state that we're then, living in. So tropical, climate of Broome, obviously can be quite humid and wet during the wet season, but most of the time, it's hot and it's can be really nice tropical place to live. So moving down to Warrnambool, was definitely a shock to the system. And I remember my first moment I went down to the beach, actually. It was, just a numbing sensation. I put my toes in the water and I still remember it. Like, that's the feeling that stuck with me forever. And at that time, I was probably only 7 years old, and that's 30 years on, and I still remember that feeling of putting my toes in and just feeling this numbing sensation because the water was so cold. So that was another big shock. And then, of course, just not having your own family around. Like, it's one thing to have my mum that wasn't well enough to be there, but to actually not grow up with her either. So I think that significantly just impacted me in a lot of ways, and I don't think it played out straight away in terms of maybe some of my behaviours and that, but I think just subconsciously I knew that, I didn't have mum in my life.
Yep.
So that was a big shock, but, I must say there were a lot of positives with growing up in Warrnambool as well. Like, despite being thousands of kilometres away from my country, which I think I, deeply felt, I did grow up in a strong Aboriginal community. I did grow up in a community that was strong in culture. I was able to grow up nurtured by elders and role models that, had a significant investment in me and, our family. So that was quite a, special thing to be able to grow up with still. And I always say, to people that want to listen to my story, is that, I'm so thankful for the Gunditjmara people and what they had to offer me at that time. Because as a young fella, particularly at that age, when you're going through, school, primary school, and then into high school, you're already faced with so many different issues, aren't you? And then to add issues around identity, not knowing who you are, wanting to identify and feel strong and proud, but not knowing much about culture. So one thing that I was able to tap into was some really strong cultural programs down there, and they were led by some really strong men in the community. Testament to Uncle Rob Lowe Senior, Rob Lowe Junior, Jamie Thomas was a big mentor of mine. So they're fellas that I was always gravitating towards because they were the knowledge holders. They were the ones that always brought you in, made you feel, loved and culturally loved, and were there to really just help shape, who you can grow into, which I think is really powerful. And if I look back on that now and what I'm able to do with my work and, do with other community programs that I've been able to run, it's because of that, that time that I've spent with those people and the knowledge that they passed on to me.
Okay. Because, as we know from the psychology point of view, 2 to 7 is a really critical part in a young child's age, particularly what happens moving forward. So you made this move at the age of 7. And the other thing is, Nyul Nyul Country and Gunditjmara Country, basically 2 different nations, 2 different languages, 2 different dances, 2 different stories.
Yep.
Was there an opportunity, was it you had to relearn everything from their aspect? Was it an opportunity for you to almost give back into them what you had known? And again, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but from what I pick up, that area also became a mission on its own. There was a lot of people that were taken out of other nations and areas and actually also put into Gunditjmara area as well. So was that sort of happening around when you were there? Is that...
No, not so much. I think it was a bit later on, but we did... I was pretty much growing up, with Gunditjmara culture.
Yeah.
So I don't think I can't remember too much of, what I learnt back in the Kimberleys, but I'm sure, I was surrounded by all of it, hunting practices and culture and family. So it would have been within me, but I think at the age of 7, 8 years old, you start to, you are what your environment is. And for me, it was growing up around, those people that were teaching me. So learning dance from a young age was really powerful. So going out to actually, what you just referred to as the mission, Framlingham mission, with a lot of mob, or going down to the local Gunditjmara Cooperative, Harris Street Reserve, which is a big meeting place for mob in that community over the last few decades. So I just have these beautiful memories of getting together with other young fellas my age, and people that now still today are some of my closest brother boys, and friends. So it's quite special when you can look at that and reflect on that journey and what you've been through, and how special it was and how much it means to you now.
So in relation to that, just to connect back in, so as you said, your dad basically was, white, English from German and Austrian background. Yep. How was he in relation to, was he fully supportive with him and his current wife or whoever he had, fully supportive of getting you and your sister immersed into that culture? I mean, how did that sort of, it sounds like he must have been willing to sort of have help with all that, so you maintained, culture and awareness.
Dad's always been overly supportive with that stuff. Like, there was no questions asked. He just knew that that's who we are, and always there to support us in any way that we wanted to go with our lives. So and I probably don't give him enough credit, because he did take on a lot in terms of looking after my sister and I at the ages that we were. And if I think back on what I've been able to learn as well as a father, I'm a father of 3 boys, so I can see how he looked after me and how I am as a dad as well, in a lot of that. So I do a lot to my father, which sometimes I probably don't, mention. Sometimes, you can, you have some funny relationships with your family or with your parents, but, I owe a lot to my dad as well.
And is he still alive? Like, is your dad still around? Are you still in touch with him? And
still living in Warrnambool, cruising around. What I loved about Dad was he's a muso, and my name, actually, just to sidetrack a bit, my name Lowell is how you actually pronounce it. It's American, and Dad, I think, liked the name. The story goes he liked the name from American musician Lowell George,
right?
And that's how I got my name. So Dad's a big muso, plays guitar, was in a band for a number of years. Actually, pretty sure when he met Mum in the Kimberleys, he was travelling through Derby in the Kimberleys playing in a band, and that's how that all started. So coming back to that, Dad's still around. He's still floating around down in Warrnambool.
Okay, awesome. So we sort of got you moved down there around 6 or 7. So how long were you in Warrnambool? Like, what was that like growing up? Schools, high school, or that side of the world, girls, sort of everything. Because, there's that whole lot of stuff happening as we're growing up and we're young and everything else. So,
excuse me. Yeah, that's right. I think I came in, to Warrnambool with not. It's funny when you look at it in terms of that educational knowledge or where you're at educationally. Like, because in my early years in the Kimberleys, I think school wasn't necessarily a priority for me. Being out with family and going out and going in community, and I don't remember doing a hell of a lot of school. I don't think I was at kinder, and I don't, I was by my mum's side a lot, out fishing and hunting, and that's what I recall. From time to time I was in a classroom, but I don't think it was a big thing. So when I came down to Victoria, going through school, I think I got through primary school all right, but then going into year 7 is where I hit some barriers. I felt like I wasn't up to it at some points, and for that reason, I think because I couldn't do the work, that I'd just default to this class clown person, and for that reason I'd have attention on me, and I'd be the cool kid, or try to be the cool kid. So that, when I look back on it, I think that's what was happening. I couldn't necessarily do the work, or there was something within me, and there's a lot of studies on those early years of education. If you don't get in early, then it really can, set you up to fail as you get into some of those later years of school. So I feel like that's probably what happened in my situation. But so going through high school, got through year 7, probably wasn't that interested in throughout year 8. I think I just got through year 8 and then ended up leaving school in year 9.
Okay.
Yeah, dropped out, but I just didn't want to drop out for no reason. I saw a lot of older brother boys in the community, so Aboriginal fellas that were probably 16, 17, 18 years old, they would get going out and finding work, getting apprenticeships.
Yep.
And I thought, wow, they're earning some good coin. I'm not really enjoying school. How about I drop out? And it wasn't too long before I did. And then I linked up with Waddawurrung Country, which is an Aboriginal employment agency in Warrnambool. And before I know it, I was looking for work. And I wanted to be a tradie ultimately. And that's what I was out to do. I landed a couple of work trials. First work trial, they told me I wasn't up to scratch. And the second work trial, I didn't get through either. And so I thought, shit, what am I going to do now? I've just left school, can't land a job. And then luckily enough, one of my mates that I did go to school with, his dad owned a plastering company. And so I landed a plastering apprenticeship. So the 2 trials that I actually did were in plastering, but I just didn't have the right work ethic.
Okay.
I just, coming straight out of school into work, understandably probably needed some mentoring or some support to say, hey, Lowy, maybe you need to just, instead of cleaning out a, plastering bucket for 30 minutes, how about you try and do it in 10 minutes? Sitting down, etching it out, having no idea whatsoever. So eventually landed an apprenticeship with my mate's dad and his business, and loved it. Really got on with a good crew. Yep. And loved the physical aspect of plastering. Could call myself a tradie, so I was puffing the chest out a bit and really starting to own that label. So I really enjoyed it.
So did the persona from the class clown, did you actually just naturally carry that across into the tradie world, and that was something you're like, hey, cool, I can actually do this, but be that guy that also has a bit of a laugh or a bit of a
Yeah, well, it's funny. Naturally, I think building sites, there's a bit of larrikindness. There's a bit of joking going on. Everyone's just trying to get along and have a bit of fun and do their job. So I think I sort of fitted into that. And the crew that I was with, they were similar ages, and we had an older boss, but they didn't mind joking around as long as you got your work done, So I felt like I found my tribe, I found, not my tribe, but, my crew that I could associate with. Whereas when I was doing it in the classroom, I was the little disruptive shit.
Yeah.
So, So a lot of my times in class when I was at school, whenever I did play up, I would get sent to detention, or I'll just find myself through maths or English or science that if I couldn't do the work, I'll just either pretend I'm sick and go to the sick bay and get out of it. So it wasn't working for me. I was never going to get through. So I eventually left and nailed that plastering apprenticeship. So that was great. Got to work mainly on commercial building sites. So as a young fella, going into some big commercial sites was a great experience. Working across Warrnambool, over Hamilton, up to Geelong, and even some jobs in Melbourne. So throughout my apprenticeship, got some really good exposure. I guess what I didn't like about that was I felt like, there was like a spotlight on me as well, because a lot of the times I'd be the only black fella on the building site, whether it's 20 people, 50 or 100, I feel like there's sometimes that friction there. Mm-hmm. And so I felt that. And, that's real and raw. Racism is a really big issue in this country. And at one point I was racially vilified on the work site as well as a young apprentice. I think I was in my 3rd or 4th year. So at that point I would have been 19 years old, I think. And in that situation, I was vilified by actually a colleague that I was working alongside. And I wasn't happy with, what he'd said to me. he wasn't happy with the work that I'd done on a particular part of a wall that we were plastering. And he said, "Oh, what have you done here, Lowell? You Black Sea."
Right.
So, for me at that moment, I just thought, no, I'm not copping this. And I could have easily retaliated and, got myself into shit, but I decided just to walk out, cool off, and just go and report it to the site office.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, they just tried to resolve it on a site level, but I wasn't happy with someone just saying, "Oh, yeah, mate, I'm sorry, da-da-da-da-da." I felt like it was, he did mean it, and there was something behind it. And for that reason, I wanted to take it further. So went through with at the time, which was, I think it was HEROC, Human Rights Equal Opportunity Commission,
Yep.
and had the matter raised at that level. So went to a mediation, and he had to write out a letter to me. But ultimately how that made me feel, and there were some other things that happened on work sites, when you're just going into the smoko hut for smoko and, people are reading these negative stories about your mob that's in the media, saying, "Oh, these lazy Black Seas," or, they're only violent or drunk. And you're exposed to that as a young person. And as a young person, that makes you feel uncomfortable and you don't want to work in that environment. So I nearly quit, but I had another good mentor that was in my life that said, just stick it out, do your 4 years, get your ticket, and then move on. And so that's what I did.
Okay.
It got to a point where I just wasn't enjoying it. Like I love the physical aspect of it. I love doing the work, but I just didn't like the environment.
Yeah.
So finished up.
Okay, go.
Yeah, well, that was it. I decided to have a break from the construction industry. And at the time, my partner, her dad was a manager of a TAFE institute in Broadmeadows in Melbourne, and they were looking for some mentors to come in and support some young school leavers. So, 4 or 5 years, back in my journey, that's what I was doing. So I was sort of in a position, I think, to maybe provide some assistance or guidance on, or support to what they might be experiencing, or what they're, what they're going through, just to help them get through that stuff. So I did. I landed my first job in an Aboriginal education unit at Kangan Institute, providing mentoring and cultural support to young fellas that have, just dropped out of school, got into the TAFE, and ultimately were trying to get a course under their belt and then get into employment. So that was a really rewarding job, coming from pretty much going through that myself to then, being in a position to help some young fellas out.
Yeah, because you had that lived experience and able to put that back in there and be able to apply that back in.
Yeah.
I just want to, you sort of broached on something, you didn't really go there on it. The whole thing of people believing what's in the news and what's on the newspapers, when it gets reported about what happens in mob and what happens with, the Aboriginal communities, and, don't believe the shit that you read and that you see. That's all I can keep putting out there every time we have these conversations. It's like there's an agenda behind all of this, and so just don't believe it or question everything about it. But then, as I said a couple of times on here, is the trauma is trauma. Now, what's happened is that we've got a whole culture that 200 odd years ago got ripped away, and people to come over trauma move to emotional distractions, and that happens to be alcohol and drugs and pornography and everything else. And so it's easy to then target a very select demographic group and go, look at all them. When you ignore the 90% of the rest of the population that's at nightclubs and everywhere else that is still pumping the drugs and still on the alcohol, and there's nothing in the newspapers about them. So just think about the biasing that's in there and what you're not seeing. Just have a lived reality and go and look out in the streets of a Saturday night through Melbourne, Geelong, Sydney. Go and have a look at your demographic that's out there, who's violent, who's crazy, who's drunk, and who's on drugs. And you're not seeing what the newspapers are reporting. So, that's all. I just sort of want to, touch on that fact to say, that's the challenge that, mob got to deal with, that they keeps it's an easy target.
Yeah.
And it's because people go, because they're on welfare. Because they're on this. They're because on that. It's like, it's not quite the case. No. Sort of thing. So from your perspective, I don't want to sort of sidetrack your journey, but, how does that make what comes up for you when we have that conversation, start deep down in relation to what you see in that space?
Yeah, too often I think we are tarnished with the same brush, and it's, we're all thrown into the same basket as, labelled as these things. And, so if you identify as a black fella, you might be just walking down the street and that's how you're going to be treated, on the basis of how the media portrays our mob. So it can be a really challenging thing. And even I notice, I've noticed countless times, and I know it's not just in my head because I've been treated differently on that basis, is even when you're going through a supermarket checkout and you're treated differently, you pick up on those vibes. So someone might be really cheerful, the checkout person might be really cheerful to the person that they're serving in front of you, and then they get to you and their whole vibe changes. Like there's not even a nice smile or even just, nice customer service. Like it's gone.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, hang on a minute, what happened? I'm just here to pay for my groceries just like the person in front of you. So that's constant, and you pick up on that and you have to live with that every single day. I try, I've been racially vilified on the footy field 3 times, just going out there and playing footy. So what I've found is constantly I've been told that I'm not good enough in sport, in employment, going to school, picked on through racism. All these different areas that I live my life in, I've been, treated differently because of who I am. So that's a really big issue in this country. And people need to understand or, just switch on to how they might be reacting to people or treating people, because, it's not okay. Yeah.
No, it's not okay at all. And one thing I know, the more, Aboriginal mob that I can get to come across and get to meet and have the opportunity to get friends with, the whole culture is just heart-driven. Like, I'm all about now becoming a heart-driven person because, my heart was always closed over, and now I'm becoming, as much as I can, heart-driven. And everywhere I look around, there's only one place I need to constantly look if ever I want advice or leadership on how to actually constantly sit there with your heart open and be connected to country and be connected to other people. It's the, Indigenous people of Australia, because that's thousands of years embedded into, that's how your communities were come off from my experience, my conversations with everyone else. So, again, I'll just put it out there. So for all you non-mob, all us white people, get over it, stop listening, stop believing, and just start to move forward. Anyway, so it's not really rant, but it's truth. And so we need to get that out, and, we need to get out there and have that conversation. So you've Kangan, TAFE, now 19, so apprenticeship under your belt, and you got this role. So what's that? Where we're heading now? Yeah,
then moved into, got a bit of a promotion in the way of working in another role. So then stepped into a liaison type role. So similar work, I guess, working with general population of students that are coming into the TAFE and supporting them through various things. But then I also had a responsibility of going into prisons.
Right, okay.
So at the age of 21, I was going into maximum security prisons. And what that was about was, so people that are incarcerated, they have the option of studying whilst they're incarcerated. And so Kangan had a contract at the time to support Indigenous people that were incarcerated, and they were ultimately allowed to, teach those people. And my role was to go in and see if there was anyone interested in signing up to those courses, and then helping them with some of their materials or books or stationery, or helping them get whatever they needed to, carry out their studies. So, but, just a big eye-opener, I guess, as a young fella. Early 20s, only, going into some of the big prisons across the state of Victoria. Certainly, just, bit of an eye-opener for me, that's for sure.
And given that there's just no disproportionate number of Aboriginal people in prison, and Aboriginal deaths in prison.
Yeah.
Is that part of what struck you, like when you're sort of trying to work with these guys in prison, just the number of young mob guys that were in there and probably what they were in there for and those sorts of things?
Yeah, I guess you try not to get too caught up on, what they're in there for.
Yeah.
I know at the end of the day you are trying to do a job, but, if we look again at the statistics and unfortunately there's too high of a number of Indigenous people that are incarcerated across the country. I think even if you look over in WA, and this was a few years ago, I think it was around maybe 65% of the prison population for Indigenous people were aged between, 12 and 18, or, youth incarceration was through the roof. So quite disturbing figures there when you start to look into that. And again, we talk about trauma. I've experienced trauma. Trauma is still real and raw in our communities, and I think that's a big reason as to why a lot of our mob sort of go through that. But also, we can go back even more and look at it in terms of, how this country is set up, and, those laws, in a lot of cases, they're there to work against our people. So, I don't want to get too much into that, but, it's been great in a sense to go in there and work in that space, because I have enjoyed it. When you can see someone benefiting from the work that you're doing, and for them to actually, go complete their studies, and then you see them then back out in community and they're working in that area that they've, knuckled down in, it's such a rewarding and great thing to see. So that's probably the biggest thing that I took away from it. But then throughout, over the past 10, 15 years, I've been able to, I think that's what drove me to go back and still work in that environment. So delivering, you might know of WIAPA. I was a WIAPA instructor, delivering a wellbeing program in the prisons, and then just recently in the last few years through Wanyari, the consultancy business that I've co-run, we've been delivering a prison to work program. So always had still that sort of the hand on working in that space, because I know how valuable it can be for people, and I generally enjoy doing that work.
Yeah, just being of service and being able to give back, and being able to just see the outcome of what you're giving, and just seeing someone going from where they were, knowing that. And that's the whole thing. It's so easy to label people and say, well, they're always going to be a bum, or they're always going to be this. And doesn't matter. Like, take race off the table. Like, it's easy to label anyone. The kid who was dyslexic at school, all of a sudden he's a dumbass, right? But the reality is he just had to learn a different way, because our school system's so focused on academia and the top 5% of the school, and schools only taking in certain kids as long as they've got certain grades, and our whole society is built around this level of competition and success. And it's so easy to sort of label a certain group that doesn't meet that criteria. It doesn't mean they're not intelligent, clever, super nice people that can be hugely successful. In fact, there's heaps of success stories around, people who, left school early and went on to make millions of dollars. But, we make that journey for them so hard. So the fact that you're seeing some, wins coming out of that, I think is pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that can sort of take away from it is even just going in there and seeing a smile from someone you might know, or someone that you've seen in community before, and they light up just with that joy of seeing another person, seeing another black fella, and it can really make their day. Being in such a shit environment and having to deal with, I'd imagine, a hell of a shit on the inside as well. So and then you see them out in the community when they eventually do get out, and it's like, they thank you. It's like, thanks for coming in. It can be really tough in there, but, when you come in and deliver those programs, it really made a difference, and, it got me through some really challenging times. And, you do hear some dark stories about what the fellas are going through there as well. So to bring a bit of light to their day, to their week, just knows, that you're doing something positive with it.
Yeah, awesome. How did you go about, so you're early 20s, and that's a tough environment to be operating in. Did you have tools, techniques? I mean, how did you go about protecting yourself spiritually, energetically, emotionally? So being, you go in and it's easy to say, I come out, I can just sort of clean myself off. But, as you said, you're hearing stories and a lot going on. So did you have anything? Do you have any support at that age? I mean, what does that look like for you to...
No, you sort of, there is some induction processes that you go through. There's obviously security processes, training and all of that stuff that comes with it. Just being mindful of your surroundings and, also the language and how you interact with, the people that are incarcerated, not leading them on or not giving them false hope with things, not promising them things, because you don't want to get yourself in a situation where, Lowell said, I can get this, so why can't I get it?
Yeah.
So, you start to develop that thinking when you do go in there, because it is critical. Because last thing you are in, some, heavy environments where people have done some nasty things before, and you do just need to be conscious of where you are and what you're doing and how you're acting.
Yeah.
Touch wood, never had an incident. And I think that's due to, the relationships that you have and how you conduct yourself in those environments, being respectful.
Yeah.
You're not above anyone in there. We're all the same. In a lot of cases, these people need more help. So it's really just about, being mindful. I do remember one situation where I was actually, asked if I could bring in a pouch of tobacco for one of the brothers.
Right.
And he alluded to saying that, hey, look, brother, I've got I've dug a hole out in this, I won't say where it was, I've dug a hole out in this paddock. And it was, close to where I grew up in Warrnambool. So I knew him from the old days of growing up in Warrnambool. And he's like, I've got 50 grand in there. I did a burg and, I've got some money out there. If you bring in a pouch of, tobacco, sweet, I'll look after you, So, I just had to casually laugh that one off.
Yep.
And try not to get myself in a situation where, I was promising something and, I could have had a target on my back as well.
Yep.
So interesting, they will try things because they don't get much in there.
Yeah.
And it could be even just something from, a pen. Pen can be deemed as dangerous items as well. So you got to watch your surroundings, what you're putting down, what you're, leaving behind, cords and things like that. So, you just got to be conscious of what you're doing in those places. But, most of the time, the fellas that we're working with haven't had any issues. Like, pretty respectful. You try and set those, I won't say rules, but just that framework of, how we like to respect each other. Yeah. I'm coming here to offer something. In return, I hope that you would like that and be respectful and engaged throughout the session as well. So there's no, coming and going in and out the door. If you're in the session, you're sitting down, you're listening, you're paying attention. Because, my respect is that I'm here showing up and I can hopefully share something with you.
So that, did you say at that stage you got up into Broadmeadows? Or so where are you living now when all this is happening?
Yeah, so that's been spread over, living in Melbourne and then living in the last 10 odd years in the Geelong region.
Yep.
So doing that work in mainly those two areas.
So knowing the age of your older son, and you're talking about you're doing this job around 21, so somewhere along the line, family starts to kick in. Can we?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
So 21, it's when I became a dad.
Yep.
My eldest son, Jamari, he was born on Anzac Day in 2006, and that came into my life, or he came into my life, I should say, meaning that as in parenthood came into my life. And that wasn't expected, you know, that wasn't on the cards at the time, I'd be honest, you know, living a bit of a party lifestyle, living for the weekends, playing a lot of footy. I love playing footy, grew up playing footy. You know, getting paid to play footy, so on weekends you'd be extra cashed up, getting your match payments, so you'd be hitting the town and, you know, partying up and shouting all your mates. So that was what I was doing at that time. Obviously working during the week, but didn't have, you know, becoming a dad on the cards whatsoever. But it did happen. I remember one pivotal moment where my partner at the time, we were sort of together, and, you know, I was thinking like, you know, do I step up and be a dad, or do I just sort of dismiss it and move on and don't be there at all, and don't worry about it? And I just remember, you know, I know what it's like to not have a parent around, and how, you know, that impacted me. And I think, I don't know, I just knew about having this responsibility, like being a dad, and because of, you know, where I've grown up in Warrnambool and what it was like to have men in my life, and I just knew it was right, you know. So, wanted to make it work, and, stuck at it, and,
So how long were you doing, like, so we obviously know what you're doing now, and, you know, you'd set up the business with, you know, your brother-in-law, or you set up the business and get
Ricky,
to that point, with Ricky. So where's that work from 21, because it sounds like you've been doing this other business for the last 5 or 6
That's
years,
right.
type of thing. So what happened? Where did we transition?
So finished up at Kangan, and then got into Aboriginal education. So I found a real passion in working with community from, you know, my experience of working with young fellas coming into the TAFE system, and then going and working in the prisons. And I just felt this urge to want to work with mob, because I knew, you know, that there were people throughout my life that gave back. And so I, landed a job with VAI, which is the Victorian Aboriginal Education Association Incorporated, and my role there was around sort of brokering relationships in the TAFE sector, higher education sector, and building pathways for Indigenous communities, particularly in the southwest of Victoria, Barwon, southwest region, around assisting mobs getting into those areas of education a lot easier. So employment, TAFE sector, and higher education.
Okay.
So really enjoyed that role. Did it probably for 4 or 5 years. Then moved on to another job in Aboriginal employment again. Did that for a little bit, and then got into working in state government. Okay. So I had a bit of experience under my belt, I think, from working in a Aboriginal community organisation, then working in a mainstream Indigenous employment role, and then finally found a role working in state government. So again, that was in Aboriginal education, and then moved into the justice work. I think coming back from working in the prison sector, really felt, you know, that I had a connection there to work in the justice space. So at the age of, I reckon, 27 or so, became an executive officer for Regional Aboriginal Justice Advisory Committee, so quite a high role. And I was grateful that the community in the Western Metro region saw value in me and what I had to offer. So I did a 12-month role there, and working across the justice sectors. So, you know, from sheriffs to police to courts to prisons. So wherever Indigenous people were coming into contact with the justice system in those spaces, it was really around minimising that negative contact that they were having. So again, really rewarding job. Saw a lot of value in that work, and really loved it at the time. But it was only a 12-month role that was available, and got to a point where I thought, I was sort of sick of job hopping and doing all these things for other people. How about have a crack at doing something for myself? And brother-in-law at the time, Ricky, was in a similar boat. He'd had experience. He left school, became a PT, had a desire to go through, wanted to play AFL. That didn't happen. He went through a program with Eddie Betts. Eddie Betts obviously went on and did amazing things in his footballing career and still doing some pretty good things now. And then Ricky went on to become a successful PT, running a PT business on Chapel Street, and then got into Aboriginal health, got into Aboriginal education, and then did some work in the justice space in court services, and then came to that sort of point with me as well. Okay, we've had all this experience, what next? And we decided at the time, and this was when my father-in-law was alive at the time, he had a real passion to want to start something for himself as well, and we decided to come together as a family and create what is known as Wanyari, Aboriginal Consultancy Services. So,
cool. And
we weren't too sure what we were going to do when we started, but we knew we were going to do something.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. We started just with, well, what's my skill set? What am I good at? Cultural programs, getting out, delivering cultural awareness. So I sort of forgot that in that sort of 22 to 27 years old, I was doing a bit of cultural awareness training delivery as well. So really enjoyed that, getting in rooms with majority of, non-Indigenous people that didn't know much about blackfellas that wanted to learn. And I found, just a really strong connection with educating people in that space, given the experience that I've had and what I've been through. So we thought that would be something that would offer. And we were able to hit the ground running and got some early contracts, which we were really excited about, got us off the ground, started to bring in some money, pay off our mortgages and things like that. So it was a sigh of relief because we had to make it work. And we just had to. So we did. Got into the employment space, helping Aboriginal job seekers get into work, so through mentoring and pre-employment programs. So what we sort of identified was what were some of the gaps in the community.
Yeah.
You have your Aboriginal cooperatives that do things, mainly focused on health and family services, but there wasn't many doing much in the Geelong region around Aboriginal employment. All right, let's target that. So we found, I guess, what we'd call our niche, and was able to build a business around that and successfully grow. And in the last 5-6 years, multi-award winning business, which we're both proud of. And having Ricky, doing what he does is beautiful to watch. He's an amazing businessman and passionate, driven, supportive. He's just a go-getter, and having someone that on your team or by your side, you realise that you can achieve anything really. So that's what we did. We just didn't know wasn't on the table. It was about getting yeses.
No, I like that. Just a question I want to probably throw out, it might be a bit of a curveball, but just right there. So through this journey of you helping others, has that helped you through your own healing journey, because if we go all the way back to, you're born in Victoria, spent 7 years up in Nyul Nyul, up in Broome, Kimberleys, then down in Victoria, so there's also been challenges that you've had, away from mum. So is this part of a healing journey for you as well, by helping others? You've been able to actually work through some things with yourself? Yeah,
there was definitely been challenging moments through that upbringing and throughout my teenage years. At times feeling lost, I think, not having family around, knowing that big part of being Indigenous, Aboriginal, blackfella is being connected to country, and so not growing up on your own country and not having your immediate family around. I think that certainly presented some challenges to me throughout my teenage years. So I'm not sure if it was an issue at the time or was a result of me going through those things, but I came into drinking at a young age, so 14 years old. That's when I started and pretty much didn't stop until what is it, 2,162 days ago where I gave up the grog. So coming on 6 years, which March this year will be 6 years ago at the grog. So that, big long period of drinking. But I came to, a tough time in my life. I think I was around 18 or 19 and I don't know what was going on, but I was just really feeling super stressed out. Felt like there was a lot on my plate and felt like there was, I had a really short fuse at the time and anything could tick me off or, at that time I felt like, it's just, I don't know, there's a lot in my mind and I was struggling, I think, and, drinking probably wasn't helping. And I remember going out to the pub one night and someone in the pub said something to me and it just triggered me. I think it was something to do with, you hanging out with them mob, are you? Like hanging out with blackfellas, are you? And it really got to me like it was a bad thing, like someone, couldn't value me for who I was. So that night I actually had a suicide attempt.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I was only 19 at the time, went back to my home and was just upset and really, crying and distraught. And I remember there was a Stanley knife blade in our laundry and Dad was home at the time and all I remember was just sort of yelling, fucking had enough, this is it, I'm done. Running over to the beach and cutting my wrist up.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So obviously Dad took you to hospital?
Yeah, Dad came over and found me and consoled me and then, ended up going into hospital and just sort of had to take some time to chill out. But that was, it's not something I really talk about much.
No, we haven't had this conversation. So, thank you. That's yeah.
Yeah,
I can see emotion in that conversation. Yeah, that's tough, man.
Yeah, it definitely was a, really difficult time going through that. Not only obviously the physical aspects of it, but just, doing that to myself and feeling like I had to do that to myself. But obviously there was something going on in my life, obviously growing up, away from family, away from mum. I think it probably got to me.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, I thought, I don't think I was trying to kill myself, but I think there was definitely a lot of hurt inside me that I was trying to let out. So by doing that, I felt like that was a release.
Yeah. Trying to swap out the deep emotional pain with some physical pain.
Yeah.
And try to actually have a way of, letting it, how can it escape out of your body without having ever been taught the tools or the techniques to release trauma.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing.
No, that's all right.
It's super tough.
Yeah.
Definitely. And on that point where, you hear of people self-harming, one of the elements is around the pain of what's happening inside is so great that a self-harm, like a cut on the forearm or something with a razor blade, actually then diverts the brain to the physical pain. And at least that's a distraction. So people who self-harm much prefer to end up the physical pain because it's, helps remove what's going on
inside
inside the head and inside the body and everything else, the voices and everything.
It's interesting whenever I see people where you can visibly see their scars from self-harm, it reminds me of that, what I've been through, and I just think, they might be going through a bit, and just try and be careful around them, or not try to be too observant of the physical aspect of their scars either, to draw attention to it. So that's a bit about that as well.
I don't have that lived experience, but I've lived with the experience entirely. I probably won't mind me saying this, from my daughter has been down that path. Of attempted suicide and also self-harm. So, and then being in a position of being aware of it, but just not being educated on knowing how to help is, makes it really hard, to just watch or see how that happens. So when I see it on other people, I just feel, there's this sense of what could we do, or are their parents aware, or, are they aware of how they could do something different to maybe help that person with that pain that they're going through. And really they don't say they're doing it so other people can see it, but ultimately that's what's happening. So it's like, you can't see the mental pain that often goes on inside people. Yeah. And that's one of the key things for us to keep remembering, this Are You OK Day. It's okay to have it on one day, but most people, the people who aren't okay will go, I'm fine.
They're not going to open up.
They're not going to open up if you're just walking up and going, Are you okay? Are you okay? I'll tick the boxes. So if you're going to ask the question, are you okay? And you're going to have an honest, open, face-to-face conversation with someone, really be willing to have that conversation with someone.
Yeah.
See where they're at.
Yeah.
Tough. So drinking. So yes, you said you now. So 2,160 days. So interestingly, I started drinking at the age of 15 and gave up the age of 2002. So I was 35.
There you go.
So so I've got a few more years ahead of you so I've just ticked over 20 years.
But similar age in giving up.
Similar age in giving up.
Yeah. Similar
age in. So what drove you? What was? I know I've talked a bit on the podcast here as to the event that drove me to go, fuck, I've just got to give up. Like, there's a choice here, and I don't like... The choice of not giving up just became unbearable, and I knew the path I had to go down. Was there a moment for you that sort of said, hey, I've just got to give up and, find a different path?
Yeah, I think having 3 boys was probably one of the biggest drivers for that change. And also within myself, I didn't feel right. Like, grog's a poison. Ultimately, it's not built for us. It's not made for us. It's not healthy at the bottom line. And so I knew that in a way I was doing that, I was harming myself. But I started to think about, well, why I'm actually drinking. And that can be, a tough question to ask, because a lot of the times I think you are masking pain, or you're trying to escape from that world that you're in that maybe you don't like. So, it was, and I really didn't like laying around being hungover and, losing days and feeling sorry for myself as well. And then also pissing up the wall, hundreds of dollars worth of money. So there was a whole range of things that drove me to it. And, when I look back on it, I think probably the biggest thing was I didn't want to continue to do that. It was around the same time, actually, when I started the business with Ricky.
Yep.
And I thought, I don't want to be waking up hungover trying to run this business that we're all so proud of, that we've started. And so there's a whole range of sort of things that were happening in my life at that moment that I wanted to, just bring a halt to. And I felt like drinking was going to compromise a lot of things in my life, and particularly having 3 young boys and them looking up. My partner at the time also hadn't drank. She wasn't a big drinker, so we didn't like to have it in the house or have it around the kids either. That was something that we were quite firm on, and so it only sort of made sense to, not do it. And that's where I stopped.
So what stops you? You wake up tomorrow morning, you've had a shit day. I'm not saying you had a shit day today, but, on any given day, you have good days and bad days, and you have that shit day or something didn't go quite right. What stops you from just leaning back over or walking back in that bottle shop and saying, fuck it, I'll just have one today?
I don't think I was drinking for that reason. Like, it wasn't so much... some people might have a shit day or not be enjoying their job, or, they might be, arguing with their partner or having family issues, and that might drive them to drink. But I don't think they were my reasons to drink. So it's, I don't think it was so much I'm having a shit day or something's bad happened to me, so I'm going to turn to the drink and try and forget about those problems. I think Yeah, it was, like I said, something a bit deeper than that I was maybe, through my childhood and through my journey, that maybe that's why I was trying to escape those things. So, yeah.
So then that would indicate that you're now facing into some of those things, because if that was part of the whole potential, when something from the past would come up, and excuse me, but I'm going to touch this. You had a very tough time at the back end of last year because your mum passed away.
Yeah.
Which could be an easy reason.
Yeah.
To go back, because that will bring up a whole lot of stuff, and
Well, on that, unfortunately, mum, was drinking a lot as well, throughout her life, and I know that impacted her ability at times to, provide the best love and care to her kids, my sister and I and my brother. So I think that I saw a lot of that with our family and what it did to them. So that sort of weighed in on that decision of, I don't want to go down that path. And, now looking back, losing mum at only 67, it obviously had significant impacts on her health.
Yeah.
As a result, probably impacted, or losing those years which she may have had living on. So, yeah.
So where you're at with your brother and sister, I know that you said you moved down with your sister down into Warrnambool, but we didn't really touch on what happened with your brother.
Yeah.
And where you're at with them now? Is it
a
relationship with them?
Yeah. So my sister's actually living in Geelong now.
Yep.
We're still pretty close, and she's always been a big supporter of me and what I've done over the years. Sometimes had our moments, as siblings do.
Yeah.
As family members do, but particularly in the last 6 months, since losing mum, having to go through that together, she's been a rock to me, and we've only really had each other to support each other, and obviously our extended families, but we had to plan the funeral together, we had to make all those big decisions together, and at that time, my brother, who's still living in Broome, actually was unwell, and we were organising the funeral, and he's had a pretty tough life. He's a bit older, around 45, and he's had some significant mental health issues throughout his journey, and at times he can be heavily medicated, and sometimes not fully present or not fully there, and which is really hard to see. To have a brother like that. So when we were planning the funeral, I was sort of going around to his house and checking in on him, seeing if he's right, if he sort of knew that mum had passed and, was aware to that and conscious to that, and he was, and he was, we just wanted to make sure that it was right for the funeral, knew what to wear and all of that. So I went and did a welfare check on him just to check in, because he wasn't answering his phone. Get to his home, and one of his support workers rocks up at the same time, and we go in. We can sort of make out, a shadow of a body on the floor, and so see him, and he's pretty much on the ground, and he's not responsive. He can't get up to the door. So then we're like, okay, probably have to ring police or ambulance to come get him, because he's obviously not in a good way. End up jumping the back fence, getting around to the back, and could see him there, and he was slowly coming to it. And I was like, Phil, you got to get up, bro. Come and open the door. And, he managed to slowly get to his feet, but you could see he's still really, wobbly as, he wasn't in a good way. And then he finally got up, was about to open the door, and he's just fallen like a tree in the woods, and bang, smacked his head on the concrete. And I thought, fuck, he's not in a good way. So I ended up getting the ambulance and police in. They stretcher him into the hospital. This is, probably 3 or 4 days after mum's pass. And then take him into hospital, find out his sodium and potassium levels are dangerously low. He's pretty much only an hour or 2 hours off dying.
Jeez.
And then whilst my sister and I are there in the sort of the ICU area, his heart stops. So med team runs in, 15 people into the room, having to resuscitate him right there in front of us. So it was fucking full on. Like, we thought we were going to lose him. He had to get put into an induced coma. And yeah, it was just... at the time. Just one of the hardest things to have to see. So he's gone down to Perth for, a few weeks, probably a week or so. They finally brought him back, and, he's on the path of recovery, but at that time, just so much going on in our lives, we just thought, this can't happen, it's not going to... So it was just such a, just a crazy whirlwind, a few weeks being up there and dealing with sorry business, and then having to go through that as well. And, just thinking back on it, it was quite traumatising. So I think still trying to work through a lot of that as well.
Yeah. Now, I know when we called up after you'd got back, I know we hadn't seen each other for a while, and I gave you a bit of space that, I could tell that you were still a bit deep. There was still some stuff that you were trying to work your way through.
Yeah. Not only, losing mum, I think that's still raw, and I think that just, I don't think that ever heals. I think you just live with that, but it's just learning how to live with it. Is the biggest thing. So, that's probably just where I'm at the moment, just trying to do my best. And I think what keeps me going is just thinking about mum and how proud she was, of not only what I've achieved, but what my sister's achieved, and, what our older brother had done with his life as well. So that's just been that constant reminder. If, you are feeling a bit down, it's okay. That's expected, but don't sit in it. Don't, dwell in it. Don't stay in it. Get back up, keep going, keep doing what you've been doing, because that's what, brought a smile to her face, and that's what she loved to see. So that's what I'm focusing on this year, moving forward. Had a bit of time off, was able to do some travel earlier this year, get out and see different countries. So headed back over to WA, went south this time, down to Perth and down to Dunsborough, which was beautiful. Got to connect with some amazing Indigenous artists down there, and then headed back home to Geelong, and then off again, went up to Sydney, Waddawurrung Country, and spent Invasion Day up there. Then managed to also connect with some mob, and then decided to do a trip up to Byron Bay, Warrnambool Country. So been a bit of a healing journey, I think. That's something that I wanted to do. I just didn't want to, new year, straight back into work, and not have that time to rest and recuperate and recover. So I think that's where I'm at the moment.
As part of that rest and recuperate and recover, though, there's been a really beautiful story of a spirit animal that's joined your journey. Do you mind talking into?
Yeah, certainly. And I think when I've learned to deal with some of my trauma, I guess, through being out on country. I find that to be quite a healing process, just being by the ocean or being in salt water or being out on country if I can't get to the ocean. And so heading over to Dunsborough, I checked in with a traditional owner from that country because I wanted to do some work with him, and he said, you're right, go down there, you can create down on that country, just as long as you introduce yourself to country. What I want you to do is to yell out my name, yell out your name, yell out the country, tell them your intentions and why you're there, and grab a handful of sand and throw it out into the ocean. And so I did that. Then I began my artwork on sunrise. And then after about 3.5 hours of creating, I go down to the water to wash up. And then I see these pot of dolphins riding a wave in. And to me, that was just, really special. It just stopped me in my tracks, and I thought, wow, that's significant, that's special, that was meant to be. And then so sweet, loved it, amazing, head back over to Vic, then plan to go up to Sydney, then up to Byron, and then in Byron, similar thing. I first got into Byron and then wanted to go out to by the ocean and just feel that country, and I did, and again introduced myself to country, said who I was, said who I was visiting there, the traditional owners, and told my intentions, and then lo and behold, a pot of dolphins come through the waves again. I'm like, what's going on here? I could really just feel this energy that is present and in my life, and I felt like it was there for a reason, and it was such a beautiful experience, and I felt like it brought some clarity and some healing to my being, whilst dealing with a lot of this stuff. So it was quite beautiful. And then eventually came back home to Geelong and got down to Aries Inlet, wanted to get back into work and wanted to get creating on the beach again. So I did, and, I was thinking about what I was going to create, and often when I'm out creating, I'll either go down there with an idea in mind or I'll just wait for something to come to me. And I thought, well, I'll just wait and see. And I thought, well, this dolphin spirit's been following me. I feel this connection with it. So that's what prompted me to create a dolphin artwork, a depiction, sort of an outline of a dolphin that with a story embedded in it around the sun. The sun's been something that I've been drawn to lately as well, sun rising and sun setting. I find that to be quite a therapeutic process. The ocean, so the water spirit. So the artwork represented dolphin, sun, water, spirit. And never attempted to draw a dolphin before, but managed to sketch one out or etch one out in the sand and carve one out in the sand, and it looked pretty good.
It looks great, actually. I've seen it.
So that one is available on my website for purchase.
There you go. So cool. We've touched now on your artwork, and so let's talk about that journey. So you did the consulting business with Ricky, and then you've now made a move to go, hey, it's time to step into the artwork. Explain your artwork, because that's how I came across you actually on Instagram. I was an Insta fan,
right,
and then found you through that and loved your artwork, and then we moved down here to Ocean Grove, and that's why I reached out. I'm like, hey, Logan's down here, I'm down here. Well, I think I just reached out and said, hey dude, I'm in the area, do you want to do a coffee? And you said yes, so I was grateful for it. So let's talk about your artwork and how that came about, because it's phenomenal artwork.
Yeah, hopefully we've got enough tape. It takes a...
Digital recording, mate, we're here for ages. So listeners, just buckle in and keep going. Drive a bit further today.
Grab another drink. And, so I came into it about 3 years ago, and how I did was... I had a love, I guess, just for being out on country, but then also at times capturing country through photography. And then probably in the last 5-6 years, really, just got interested in drone technology and flying drones and seeing country from that viewpoint. It really, it's not a view that you get to see every day unless you've really got a drone. So being able to fly my drone and get out on country is something that I just love doing, because it's just so beautiful to take it in, to see that view from above is so special. And then, doing a lot of consultancy work in that space, and delivered a session, cultural awareness training session with an organisation in Geelong, and we were talking a lot about cultural safety. And often it's a bit of a buzzword that we use around, all right, how can we, create environments, work environments, or environments where Indigenous people are going to come in, and how they're going to feel safe. So, there's a number of different ways that you can do that, through educating your staff to be decent people, and not treat people differently based on who they are. It's not really difficult. Or it can be the the look and feel of the place. So, you could hang artworks in your office or reception areas. You can have acknowledgements of country. You can have flags being flown above, attached out the front or inside the buildings. So when, an Aboriginal person has a connection point or comes into contact with your organisation or business, they're going to feel some form of connection based on that environment that you create. So for that reason, they might feel, open to, come and connect and, just feel like they're going to be treated equally. So talk a lot about cultural safety in those training sessions, and sometimes they're really hard sessions to deliver because I do talk a lot about my lived experience, mum being removed, family traumas, racism, a lot of shit that I've had to deal with throughout my life. So often after those sessions, I go down to the beach, and it's just my way of breathing, letting go, and then filling myself back up. And so then I was reflecting though on what cultural safety meant, because I don't think we're getting it right, and I don't think it's really true. And when I reflected, I thought, well, what does cultural safety mean to me? And it got me thinking. I thought, well, I'm here on the beach. I'm a saltwater man. This is it. I can be myself. There's no fear or judgment. I can bring my whole self to this space. I'm not going to be treated differently. I feel strong in my culture. I feel strong in my identity. It's just the ultimate. That's what I believe cultural safety is being on country and feeling strong and proud. And so that's what prompted me to draw a circle in the sand. So I used my foot and I carved out a circle, probably only 3 meters in diameter. And then I decided to draw these U-shapes on the outside. So U-shapes in a lot of Indigenous art represent people. And to me, so I positioned those all around the circle like a meeting place. Mm-hmm. And so to me, they represented elders and ancestors. And then I sat myself in that circle and I thought, this is it. This is how I feel, safe. So then I popped the drone up and I thought, let's have a look at this. And I thought it looked pretty cool. So anyway, that night to get back home, download the image off my drone and decide to pop it on Facebook. And people were going nuts over it. It was something they'd never seen before. Mm. It was storytelling on country and in country, and it was something quite unique that people have never seen. So I had people commenting, wow, that's cool, that's deadly. And then I had someone say, oh, that's amazing, you should collaborate with Indigenous artists and do more work like that. And I thought to myself, well, I could collaborate with an artist that might paint, but they're not necessarily going to know how to do sand art in the sand. Mm. So I thought, no, this is something that I'm going to roll with. This is something that came to me. I don't need someone else's creative input on what I do here. This has come to me in a very special way, and I'm going to do it. And so I did. And I just, felt like, oh, cool, I'm going to get out. I'm going to try this out and, see what else I can create, see what other stories I can tell. And that's what I did. And then, lockdowns came into effect. This was at the end of 2019 and we were moving into 2020. And, this COVID hit and we began become locked down in our towns and cities. And that just, I was able to still, though, get out to my local beach because it was in close proximity and technically I was still allowed to go out and do that. And so I did, and because we weren't doing a lot of our consultancy-based work, where we'd be out delivering training, going to organisations, our work was drying up, and I thought, well, I've got a bit more free time, so I'm going to go out and create more art. And that's what I did. I just went out, got creative, started just getting right into it, really loving it. And people were just really, my following was growing. I was getting up to 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, 6,000 followers. I thought, wow, this is unbelievable. Yeah. What's going on here? And I just really got into it, loved it, didn't know anything about printing, didn't know anything about framing, but I knew that people wanted these artworks. Yeah. So that's what I did. I got in touch with a local printer who did high quality, high end printing because I knew that's what it needed to be on. You know, I just didn't want to pop down to Kmart and get it done on a couple of, you know, whatever that is, size photos, A4 photos, and print them out and give them out. This work needed to be big and it needed to have an impact, and that's what it's been doing.
Yeah. And it's amazing. Like Salty One here, Instagram, I think that's also your website, isn't it? saltyonehere.com.
Salty One is the name, but I couldn't get that after. So Salty One is that connection as a saltwater man.
Yes.
So I'm a salty one, not because I'm a sooky fella. Because some people are, using the term salty as being sooky.
Yeah.
So I have to clarify that now. Salty One is because I'm a saltwater fella. So yeah, Salty One. I tried to get that Instagram name, but the Salty One handle wasn't available, so I had to go with Salty One here. But the business name is Salty One.
So you've also now gone on, as you said, someone has said, do some collabs with some Aboriginal artists, and you're like, no, I'm going to do my own stuff first, which you have, and it's just amazing stuff. But you have now gone on. You've now actually done some of that work, and there's, you've actually then just do your original design and then hand it across to another Indigenous artist and go, well, what do you want to do?
Yep. So the process there is that I'll work with an artist. Generally, I want to know who they are and what they do and how they go about running their art business, because that's important to me. I want to, where I can associate with professionals, because that's how I like to operate. And I'll reach out to the artist and see if they're interested in a collaboration. And then if they are, we pick an artwork that I think would suit their style, but also they need to feel a connection to the artwork and the story as well. And I'll print out a huge canvas. So we're talking like 2.5 metres by 1.4. So I'm sure the artist gets it and thinks, what the heck's going on here? This guy stitched me up, I'm going to be here for weeks. But I thought, if we're going to do this, we've got to wow people. Yeah. And that's what I've been doing. So the artist generally spends anywhere between 30 to 60 hours painting on the artwork. And the designs that they do are stories that represent, their style of art and their culture. And these artworks have been, how would you put it? Just knocking people over, I guess. Yeah. They've stopping people in their tracks and really just, jaw-dropping stuff, not just speaking about it from myself, but, I've had people purchase these large original pieces from interstate, not even seeing them in person. Yeah. Like saying, hey, I want that. I need that in my home or in my office. And, there are these original artworks that are that size. They're going for around $20,000 each. So, because they are significant, they're big, they're of that value and of that worth. And
it's a one-off with two, or in some cases with the Kimberley connection, you had two sisters and yourself, but it's two or three, original Aboriginal artists, and it's never going to be replicated ever again. So it's worth every cent.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, you got something else. I know that when this episode comes out, if we get our timing right, your artwork's been undertaken to a new direction. Yeah.
So with my work, predominantly it's been on artworks like canvases and prints, high-end works, mainly in a large format. So I do sort of start off at around the 60 by 40 centimetre artworks and then go up to, close to 3 metres, by 1.4 metres. But I've had, just because of the interest in what I do and people wanting to work with me, I've been approached by construction companies that are building new buildings and having my design imprinted in cement as a part of the formwork and the concrete panelling, and that being put on or built on the side of buildings. So I've got a big commercial project happening in Collingwood at the moment that is just about finished, and also about to, I've just released the AFL, one of the AFL Indigenous round Guernseys, which is with the Melbourne Demons Football Club.
Yep, NAM.
The
NAM Football Club.
As they're known, yep.
Yeah, hugely exciting to see your design on their jumper running around out in the G.
Yeah, well, what's really cool about it is my kids are actually Melbourne supporters, so they've done really well. Probably had some disappointing early years in their life, but Melbourne Demons are coming into some fine form, and they're playing some really good football and doing some really great things. And I'm actually an Eagles supporter, being a WA original, but really excited to be working in partnership with the Melbourne Demons Football Club. And the jumper's going to be worn by not only the men's team but also the women's team when they're out playing for Indigenous Round and other times of the year, I believe. So a huge occasion. So what actually occurred for me creating that work was I was asked to go down onto the beach and actually create the design in the sand. And then what they've done from that is they've taken a picture of my artwork with a drone. Then they've used that image to trace over it through a graphic design process. And then I've worked with them. I've pretty much sat next to them and guided them through how I wanted the design to look on the jumper. So quite a special project. Really excited to have partnered with the Melbourne Demons, and I'm really honoured to be able to work with them. I know they've got a long history, an association with Indigenous footballers playing at the club, and I know they're doing some incredible work across Indigenous communities across Australia as well.
Yeah, it's awesome, and I'm sure the kids are looking forward to getting a signed copy of all the players on one of the NAM jumpers that they've produced. That's what I'd be asking them for.
Yeah. So we do get a couple of the jumpers, which is great. The boys actually get to be a part of the Guard of Honour on the night of running out of the Indigenous round. Yep. I think it might be the day actually. So some exciting opportunities there for the kids because they're Melbourne supporters, so they're wrapped.
Beautiful. So in simple terms, you just come a long way. If you think about that journey that we've just covered off in whatever it happens to be, but over an hour and a half, we've had a good yarn.
Well, what we didn't talk about was just quickly, mid last year, was lucky enough to be awarded the National NAIDOC Award for Creative Talent, which is like the Artist of the Year across Australia. So, in my eyes, in our community, it's probably one of the most prestigious awards. So on the awards night, alongside me had Buddy Franklin receiving an award. Ash Barty had Uncle Jack Charles, who recently passed away. Rest in peace, Unc. Auntie Lois Peeler, and a number of other incredible, people doing some incredible things across the country. So to be up there on that platform is just mind-blowing. And then a few months later, got invited to New York Fashion Week.
Yes.
To feature my work on a runway event on a rooftop in New York. So that was a collaboration with my niece, Bobby Lockyer, who's also a very talented artist, but she's also a designer, and she's got her own clothing brand called Gunditjmara. And she invited me to collaborate with her. So using my drone imagery and sand art as the basis, combined with her painting overlay, that fabric has then been used by a dressmaker to make the designs and outfits for the runway event. So never in my wildest dreams. Look, I've never been to the States, but I went straight to the Big Apple and straight to New York Fashion Week. So
there you go. If you're going to go big, you're going to go big.
Well, that's right. We're not going to muck around here. So don't worry about, Australian Fashion Week or some of the local things that are going on in Australia. Just go to the Big Apple and go to the big show.
Yeah. The rumour has it at the runway show, someone's gone, who's that bloke with who's that woman with Laurie over there? And someone goes, we think that's J-Lo. It was more famous than everyone else.
Yeah, no, I didn't get to bump into any of those big celebs, but it was still an incredible experience. Like, to be on the world stage showcasing our art and culture, that's a very proud moment, particularly for my family, for my kids, for my community back home. I know everyone was, very proud of us. So, and Mum as well. She was around at that time. So, yeah, that was really special.
Yeah, so like just listening to that, because there's parts of what I hadn't, we've had a few yarns, but there's stuff that you spoke about today which I wasn't aware of. So thanks for sharing that. But yeah, just to listen to that journey, of where you started, and just to see where you are now, and be able to have be able to just call your friend and be able to sit down and have chats and just watching. I'm just can't wait to see where the next few years takes you. You've got so much talent and so much heart and so much capability. I think it's just going to be an amazing journey for you over the next few years.
Yeah, thanks brother, really appreciate it.
So one of the things too, as we wrap up, which is I always ask everybody, I didn't drop this into you earlier on, but it's probably around helping men and men's mental health and everything else, and we sort of have a wide ranging audience. Is there something from your journey or something you've been on where you could just give a message out to men and women out there, but men about, hey, healing or connection or something that sort of drops with you that you found has actually helped you along your path?
Yeah, certainly. I think being able to just understand maybe how you're feeling and going in life and checking in on that, and one of my friends always use this analogy of getting your car serviced, and because ultimately over time it gets worn out and certain things will happen to it, so naturally that's going to happen to us as humans. It might not be a break of an arm, or it might not be something physical that prevents you from doing things, but it could be the mental or the emotional distress that you might have to deal with, or you have to deal with over a long period of time. So it's just checking in with that, and just being mindful that if you are acting different or being different to what you might be used to, or you are short fused, or you're angry, or you're upset, what I like to do to try and regulate some of those emotions is use the ocean or sea country as that that protective mechanism to look after myself. So if I'm feeling like I've had a bad day, or something has happened where it's upset me, then I like to get down to the ocean and just be in the water, or even just walking down there with my kids, or just taking that moment to chill out. And I find that's probably I know now that I need that in my life. Like if I'm dealing with stuff, okay, go down to the water, go fly the drone, go for a walk, whatever it might be, just get down by it, because I know that I'm feeling, half an hour in, feel like magic after it, and, nothing, can really affect me after that. I just feel like it's a great tool that I've been able to utilise throughout my time, and particularly in recent months with some sorry business and dealing with that stress and grief. I've been doing that. I've been going to the beach, like went over to WA and went to Sydney, went up to Byron, come back here, it's evident that it works. So I just encourage people to do that.
Awesome, man. And I'm the same. If you're doing it, do it bare feet. Don't put it on your shoes. People I see walking up and down the beach in sneakers or thongs, I'm like, please, For anyone who knows anything about it, if you know anything about electricity, putting rubber between yourself and the ground actually, blocks all that energy connection. So just get in bare feet. Awesome advice. It's been a great chat. It's been a great yarn. Thank you for, taking the time. I know for our listeners, it's probably one of the longer episodes that we've had, but, why wouldn't we sit down and have this chat when we've got the opportunity? So thanks, brother. Thank you for everything that you're doing for me. I really appreciate it. You probably don't think you do much, but you do. You keep inspiring me, and I watch what you're doing, and I'm just loving it. So it's been an awesome chat, and looking forward to continuing to build on our friendship and mateship as we go forward.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, folks, that's it. A wrap for episode 65 of the Unearthed Man podcast. As we said, we did this in a bit of a back room, with a face-to-face, so it's been an amazing chat, and absolutely there were times where there was a lot of raw emotion in that conversation, and all credit due to Lowell for having the courage to open up about some of the things that have gone on in his life. But it just shows that you can do whatever you want to do in life. You can succeed in life, whether, and I'll say the words, in Australia for Indigenous, it is arguably against all odds because of what's taking place. And to see these brave men and women constantly just fronting up every single day in a system that's set against them, but to see the achievement and the bravery and just showing us the way how to go, it's awesome. So definitely, I think as we validated with salty1.com.au, you can actually jump on the website, or salty1 here on Instagram. Check out Lowy's artwork. It's absolutely awesome. And that's it. So I'm going to bid a good farewell. Hope everyone's taking care, looking after himself. So sending you much love and peace. Stephen.